Just looking around the room, I can see so many faces that I know from times past and times present, but I'm very, very pleased to open today's conference. Welcome to Her Excellency Dame Paulette Louisy, the Governor-General of St Lucia, but also welcome to colleagues and students and friends from around the University of Bristol, first of all, around the UK, from small states in the South Pacific, small states in the Caribbean, from small states in the Indian Ocean. The thing I want to say is, well, it's wonderful to see you all here together. It's a real pleasure to see you in this one room. This event is sponsored and organised by the Cabot Institute, the Graduate School of Education, Cezanne Associates, and they have an annual conference, and their 2014 conference is in partnership with us today. This conference brings together academics with policymakers, international agencies, and practitioners from different contexts around the world. Our main aim is to learn from, that's the important word, to learn from the distinctive experiences of small island developing states. Now, my comments are going to be brief. I hope you have a stimulating, challenging and enjoyable day. And I'm now pleased to ask Professor Rosamond Sutherland, the acting head of school of the Graduate School of Education, to say a few additional words. Thank you.
So this is a hugely important conference, and it's being hosted by the whole of the University of Bristol plus the other associates, but we particularly welcome you to the Graduate School of Education. So the idea that we've got a kind of mixed group of people is very important, because I think one of the ways of moving ideas forward is to bring together practitioners and researchers and people from different areas of expertise. And that, in a way, is the hallmark of good interdisciplinary work.
As Michael said, this year we're so pleased to have been able to partner with Bristol University for our annual conference and for our collective gathering of our teachers from Wales and Zanzibar, so our school linking initiative, to come together here and to meet with the broad range of expertise that's come in through the Bristol connection. I'm also really pleased that Monaidi is able to join us. Monaidi Saleh is the Permanent Secretary of Education in Zanzibar, and we've been working very closely with her for the last 14 years as well. So we bring together policy, we bring together practice, and through the academic work of the Small States Research Centre, we're looking forward to a very exciting conference. So thank you.
We're very pleased to have so many of you here today, as has already been said, from across the globe, really, representing a range of disciplines and backgrounds, marking today's conference as a distinctively multidisciplinary and international event. Today you'll have the opportunity to hear about climate change adaptation, about women's perspectives, about coral reef research, aquaponics, and their implications for sustainability and education for sustainable development. Today is our opportunity to learn from what we like to call the sharp end, those small island states and perspectives that have been some of the first to deal with the realities of living with and reacting to environmental change and uncertainty. The messages and reactions from today will feed into a focused research planning workshop tomorrow with a smaller group of today's researchers and practitioners. I'd now like to welcome Pro Vice Chancellor Professor Judith Squires to introduce our keynote speaker today.
Welcome everybody. As Pro Vice Chancellor at the University of Bristol, it's a great honour to be here this morning introducing such a distinguished guest and visitor, friend and honorary graduate. Dame Paulette Louisy is the head of state and Governor-General of St Lucia. She's the first woman to hold this office, and having taken it up in 1997, I believe that she may still be the longest serving female head of state in the Caribbean. We marked the achievement of Dame Paulette by awarding her an honorary degree in 1999, And interestingly, and quite rightly, others have followed where Bristol led, and Dame Paulette now has 2 additional honorary degrees from the University of Sheffield and the University of West Indies. Above all, Dame Paulette has contributed significantly to the development of education in St Lucia, having spent most of her professional life in higher education and in her current official role. We are therefore deeply honoured to be able to welcome her here today as your plenary speaker.
Thank you, Pro-Vice Chancellor, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Like most other small developing states, the Caribbean is highly prone to devastating natural disasters. It sits along a subduction zone within the Atlantic hurricane belt, and this shows you the hurricanes, that have affected that region over a period of, I think, 2 or 3 decades. It sits too along, as I said, the Caribbean subduction zone, so it is highly vulnerable both to cyclonic as well as seismic and other associated natural hazards. Its location, that is the Caribbean, is considered to be one of the highest risk areas of the planet, in spite of its long-held description as Paradise Islands or islands in the sun. And its vulnerability, or their vulnerability, is also attributed, though, to, first, their small geographic area. If you notice, the island of Anguilla is only 91 square kilometers. And that smallness of size accounts for the fact that disasters sometimes take country-wide proportions. So by the time a Category 1 hurricane traveling at 110, 120 miles an hour just blows, it blows over the whole of Anguilla. And St. Lucia also, for that matter. There's also a limited capacity to reactivate the development process after a devastating event. In other words, they have a very low level of resilience. The region is therefore teetering, I say, on the sharp edge of environmental uncertainty as a result of the effects of climate change, climate variability, extreme weather conditions, which often lead to land degradation either from drought, or flooding, or landslides, or sea level rise. I can recall, for example, when the active Atlantic Caribbean hurricane season lasted for just 1 month. That's in the 50s, 60s, with the public awareness campaign containing the rhyme that you learned at school: June, too soon. July, stand by. August, come it must. September, all over. October, remember. Now, however, the Atlantic hurricane season lasts from June the 1st to November the 30th, leaving the islands on tenterhooks and in disaster preparation mode for 6 months every year. And then, of course, the other 6 months we're trying to bring it back to where it was. Usually, it's taking 2 steps backwards. The hope of one delegate from St. Lucia, not me, who will be traveling to Samoa, is that small island developing states would soon be in a position to transition from a vicious circle of increasing vulnerability to a virtuous circle of increasing resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your indulgence.
To introduce our chair for this session is Dr. Amel Thomas, who's a senior lecturer at the University of Northampton.
Thank you. And welcome to this session titled Living with Environmental Uncertainty, Challenges and Responses. So this section of the programme really considers the perspectives, as Tara just mentioned, from the Indian Ocean and the Pacific regions respectively. In particular, the presenters, Vijayini Torres from the Indian Ocean Commission for Education and Sustainable Development in Small Island States will present next, and Professor Rich Pankos from here, the University of Bristol and the Cobalt Institute, we welcome, and they will be speaking to us. Unfortunately, Dr. Frances Coyo cannot be here today due to illness, but we do send her our best wishes, and I in turn will try to summarise her presentation notes accordingly, so we'll go through those quite briefly. So I'm going to hand over to Virginie. Thank you.
So my name is Virginie Torrance. I'm in charge of Education for Sustainable Development within the Islands Project, which is a project financed by the European Union and implemented by the Indian Ocean Commission. So the project, the objectives is to enhance sustainable development in the Indian Ocean region, which is a big challenge, as you may understand. The overall objective is to contribute to an increased level of social, economic and environmental development, and the specific one is to accelerate the implementation of the Mauritius strategy. Within Islands, we are working mostly at national and regional level and institutional level. This is not a project where some other Indian Ocean Commission project, they are buying things for fishermen or things like that. This is not that type of project. This is something more around policies and things like that. This is about regional cooperation and integration, seeds, knowledge exchanges, and methodology to deal with the large asymmetries between the development stages of the beneficiary countries.
Okay, thank you, Virginie, for the challenges and the efforts within the Indian Ocean. You've made it very distinctive through cooperation and integration and how your partnership works with schools to ensure deeper pedagogical strategies, as well as empowerment and networking. So thank you very much. Moving forward, I'm just going to showcase the slides from Frances from the University of the South Pacific. I'll just provide a very brief synopsis of her work, which seeks to address the Pacific Island context, and in particular the issues of development, sustainability, resilience, and prominence within that region. The projected impacts of climate change across all sectors and the vulnerability and low adaptive capacity of SIDS is inextricably linked to the socio-cultural and economic context of these island states. Vulnerabilities include low availability of resources, as we've also said earlier, a small but rapidly growing population, remoteness, susceptibility to natural disasters, excessive dependence on international trade, and vulnerability to global developments. And as we can see from this table from the UN Office for the Coordination of Human Affairs, Samoa, Tonga and Fiji are highlighted as 3 of the 12 countries which are most at risk from climate threats. In order to further consider this in an interdisciplinary light, I'm going to pass over to Professor Rich Pankos.
Yes, there is climate change, and there is biodiversity loss, and there is land use change, but there is also the fact that there is rapid change, complex change, and multiple impacts. So pulling that all together into sort of what I look as, say, larger lessons about how we want to live in this world, there's a couple of things that I always think about. One is the long term versus the short term. Now, the frustration of most of my colleagues is that we are fixated with short-termism. Elections make you think short-term. Shareholders and their need for dividends on quarterly reports make us think short-term. Our own experiences in life, actually compared to the issues we're concerned about, make us think short-term. And we must somehow think of a way of education and communication that motivates people to think long-term. Now, when I say that, I think, oh, that's all fairly obvious. But I say that to some colleagues, and they say, Rich, that is an American perspective, that's a European perspective, where we are only beginning to see the first sign of climate change, and we're very invested in the way we live now. I have other colleagues who tell me, many of you are living at the sharp edge of climate change. You are seeing the impacts now. So actually, you also have to have a bit of a short-term perspective because you have problems now. So then the challenge is how, instead of short-termism being a cause for inaction when we must be acting, the challenge becomes how do you act, but in a way that will still be sustainable for the problems 100 years from now. Thank you all for coming, and it's been a real pleasure speaking to you, and I hope to have lots of conversations this afternoon and this evening. Thanks.
So I helped to organize the conference, and it was a great pleasure to bring the different groups together from the 3 different regions, the Caribbean, the Pacific, and the Indian Ocean, here to a place that has an increasing visibility and increasing emphasis on sustainability issues and environmental issues. So it also allowed the University of Bristol to be exposed to some different groups, and we're hoping some new partnerships to be formed out.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for rejoining us for the closing session. What we're aiming to do is to get as many pieces of feedback and responses about the breakout sessions that we just had. First, I'd like to invite Jay Coombs. She's also Cezanne Associates Belize and was chairing the session in here, which was interdisciplinary research. So
I will endeavor to summarize the major findings from what I consider to be an exceptional afternoon. A lot of sharing, very diverse presentations, but presentations that were profound, provided a lot of information, and made very specific links between climate change, households, homes, and the world of science just as well.
My name is Hassan Miguel. I'm a professor of visual computing at University of Bradford. But I'm here on this conference because I have a lot of interesting projects that I'm doing in the Maldives. I think the kind of most important thing that came out in our session is the kind of variety of projects, the ideas, the kind of policies. And from my point of view, it's a very good learning experience in terms of the exchange of the ideas. And the fundamental thing for me is the breadth of people, the variety and the potential collaboration for future work.
So now to Professor Simon McGrath from the University of Nottingham, who's going to tell us about the session on international agency responses.
We had a really interesting discussion. When it's billed as international agencies, you're kind of expecting one kind of thing, I think, often. But what we had was a very diverse group of organisations. We had UNESCO, the Commonwealth Secretariat, the Council for Education in the Commonwealth Human Ecology Council, and then the Council for British Teachers, who were reporting on a DFID-funded project in Wales. The issues we're talking about require the building of bridges, to use one of Michael's often used metaphors. And so, I think what we've been seeing in our session, but we saw across the day, interdisciplinarity is essential. But also intersectoral thinking. When we get beyond our academic disciplines, in the development world, of course, it's different sectors. It's health, it's education, it's agriculture. And that we've got to have those conversations. I think it's a really good opportunity. The issues that we're talking about are ones that can't be solved by one discipline, by one group of people. It's bringing together practitioners and policymakers and NGOs and academics, I think, is essential if these real-world problems can get solved.
Sada Rashid from Cezanne Associates Zanzibar, who was leading the interactive session learning about sustainable development in small states.
Good afternoon, everybody. And we have a discussion on changes. And we come up with these messages here. These are the messages from all the participants in our room. The messages: more training at the beginning and throughout. And who is responsible for this is schools and the government. The government should be the main responsible body for this.
I'm Catherine McCallum, and I'm the one of the directors of Cezanne Associates. Our session was with teachers and also looking at sort of practice, and it was a very interesting session. We had quite a mixed group in there from all sorts of different disciplines, but all having an interest in education. And what we got from the group was really the importance of collaboration and engagement, and learning how to really effectively engage and share lessons in terms of education for sustainable development.
All right, now we're going to turn to our panel now, some of whom we've already heard from earlier today. We'll keep to the order on the program here. So we're looking for your final thoughts and reflections. What are the main takeaway messages from today from you? So we'll start off with Dame Perlette Louisi, please.
Thank you. I want to start with, again, the concept of education for sustainable development, and again make the point that it is not enough to say that it is a set of principles and leave it to individual, either teachers or ministries of education or other institutions to decide or to sit down and articulate for themselves what are those sets of principles. Otherwise, that's why I asked in the question, is it those set of principles, are they universal or contextual? The idea, too, of building the capacity of communities to deal with with climate change, and I would not say just simply climate change, but all disasters.
Thank you for that, and for, again, contextualizing it for your region and also giving us some ideas of, practical opportunities. So Dame Perlette mentioned about, roles and responsibilities of teachers and maybe the Ministry of Education. We're going to hear now from someone from the Ministry of Education in Zanzibar. So I'd like to welcome Wanaidi Abdallah, who is the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Education and Vocational Training in Zanzibar. So welcome very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, let me, on behalf of the ministry, let me express our sincere gratitude for being invited to this conference. To me, this was a learning process. And I realized that we still need a lot to do, but we need to collaborate together to achieve a sustainable development which we are talking about. And sustainable development is a complex issue. And especially when it comes to change the behavior of the people. And that is a thing which cannot be done in a day. So it needs collective efforts of the society and collaboration between the states and the support from the international organization in order to achieve the sustainable development and improve the lives of our well-being. Thank you very much for your attention.
We've asked Virginia to do a lot today. She spoke up here earlier. She then shared more video clips and more about the Islands project in the workshop, and now we're going to put her to work again.
Thank you. It will be quite short. In fact, it has been a pleasure to be there today. I knew this before, but we can realize that for Pacific, Caribbean or Indian Ocean regions, the challenges are the same for the seeds. We are all facing the same challenges. And this morning we were talking about national and interregional cooperation and said the policies of each country versus the policies of all of one region. But in fact, I think that we can say that united we stand and divided we fall. I've heard seeds are mostly can be or should be considered as leaders and not victims. And this is true. We are talking now more of blue economy versus green economy. And this is coming from seeds. And this is really important to keep that in mind so we can really make changes. That's it.
It's good to have a range of perspectives. That's what today is all about, and this is reflecting the diversity of the group and approaches and perspectives. And thank you very much for your comments. Rich, would you like to finish us off on the panel responses, please?
Sure. Thank you, Tara. I'll try to keep the comments brief. As you can imagine, most of my thoughts have already been reflected by those who have spoken before me. There's been many common themes, how we work in networks, how we share knowledge. One of the really exciting themes of the conference is learning and education and how we learn in different ways, but also how we can learn together. And I think there are a lot of different ideas that we talked about today. I suppose if I were to just pick two ideas that really resonated with me, not because they were more significant than any of the others, but they just stuck with me. The first was the very fantastic suite of examples that Dame Hurlet Louisi mentioned in that is happening on a regional basis in the Caribbean, where you have numerous countries coming together, working together, creating their own systems, their own network. If there's difficulty getting a European or American insurance company to offer insurance, create your own reinsurance industry and business. And that really, I like that story. It's so much more powerful for people to learn from one another, to actually see how you do things rather than simply be told about how to do things. The final thing I would say is that whenever I come to any sort of conference or workshop, an interdisciplinary workshop, I don't walk away trying to think about, what new collaboration I will find, because sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. That's not the point of interdisciplinary research from my point of view. It's actually, how am I different at the end of the day? How have the conversations affected me? And the one thing that really struck me is just the power of working together. Right. Thank you.
We'll change gears slightly here, so please help me welcome Professor Colin Brock.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My first task is to congratulate Michael on the 20 years of this centre, which is an incredibly important achievement for the study of education in small countries. I've been involved in small country work since 1972, when I was the British government officer in the Caribbean. Ever since then, I've been involved in small country work, and quite often I come here to Bristol because this is now the main centre for education in small countries. Now, my final function is to reveal this document. It's a sort of Dead Sea Scrolls of small country research. It predates email, it predates computers in universities. In fact, it's been quite difficult getting it together because my filing system at home is what is called geological. It's stratified, The odds and ends of this were pretty down in the Paleozoic era, Anyway, I managed to put together one complete copy of this for the small state archive that Michael is developing here. This, we think, is the first conference in Britain on education in small states in 1984. So, as my final act for today, I'm going to present these to Michael and congratulating him again, and thank you all for coming to this conference. Thank you.
That leaves us with the pleasure of saying some important thank yous to everyone. So particularly we want to thank some of our plenary speakers who have come from afar. So if we can have Dame Perlette and Virginie, we've got a gift for both of you for giving a substantial session for us today. And I think Michael wants you to actually open them because he wants... So for coming so far and giving a main session...
The conference I found to be very stimulating, particularly because of the multidisciplinary perspective. I'm basically in education in small states, but looking at the whole issue of environmental uncertainty, climate change, climate variability, I found this to be particularly not just interesting, but so crucial to what is happening right now, particularly among small island developing states. And so I think that particular conference, bringing us all together, is setting a good foundation for our discussions at the conference in Samoa in September.
tear. No woman, no cry. No woman, no cry. Now I know you know this. Come on. No woman, no cry. Shed no tears. No woman, no cry. No woman, no cry. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No woman, no cry. Thank you.
To find further information, you can go to www.smallstates.net.